everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, I want to talk about this quote that stuck in my mind. This is from President Nelson, October 2018 General Conference, a talk called Becoming Exemplary Latter-day Saints. So this was his second General Conference, and when he said this, it stuck in my mind. So much so that now I've decided to do kind of like a study into this, see if there's more to it. Let me just read the quote. My dear brothers and sisters, the assaults of the adversary are increasing exponentially in intensity and in variety. Our need to be in the temple on a regular basis has never been greater. I plead with you to take a prayerful look at how you spend your time. Invest time in your future and in that of your family. If you have reasonable access to a temple, I urge you to find a way to make an appointment regularly with the Lord, to be in his holy house, then keep that appointment with exactness and joy. I promise you that the Lord will bring the miracles he knows you need as you make sacrifices to serve and worship in his temples. So I thought that kind of peculiar because keeping your appointment with exactness and opposed to what? Like not keeping it with exactness? Like, I don't know if he's kind of referring to like, oh, you plan on going to the temple, but then you decide not to, or you change it. I don't know. Put in the comments what you think he means by that. But the fact of the matter is, he used the word exactness. So after hearing this, I felt like I heard it a few other times. So much so that I thought maybe this is kind of like a theme recently. So I'm going to show you what I found. Before I do, let me give you the update on the Flood the Earth challenge. We have one new report of a person meeting with the missionaries. So that's really exciting. We have 6,293 copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared so far. Unfortunately, nobody new has joined the challenge, so right now we're at 0. Hopefully that changes today. But we had a pretty good stretch of days where we had people joining each time that I updated the tracker. So if you haven't done it yet, at least try to do it once. Let me know in the comments. Just write a comment. Tell me how many copies of the Book of Mormon you shared, or if somebody's meeting with the missionaries, or if someone got baptized, or send me an email. Those are the two ways. Don't send it to me on social media. I have my Facebook and Instagram accounts, but it's harder for me for some reason to keep up with those. And then include this right here, hashtag, like the number sign, flood, because that helps me find your comment and it helps me find your email. Put it in the subject line of the email, if you don't mind. So we're trying to get to 10,000, and slowly but surely. But see, this is how you obtain success. Like it's not all just like all at once. You have to be persistent and patient. I have all confidence that we'll make it to 10,000. So, and just remember, the channel goal is to at least send out 10 per person. But don't let that be a limit. Go as far as you can. Okay. So what I wanted to do before reading some of these quotes is show you my phrase tracker. If you're new to this, this is, this is a way that I keep a tally of all the general conference talks that include these words or phrases. So if we zoom in, for example, the word exactness showed up in one general conference talk in 2020. So I do it by year, not by conference, because that would be too hard. But I'm just doing it by year, and I feel like it's pretty good. It's pretty informative. I've searched many different things, and it really speaks volumes just looking at how often they use certain phrases or words. So with exactness, we're starting at the top here. You'll notice it hasn't been said. for these last 3 years. Now, we still have one more General Conference coming up in October, so it may be used in one or more of those General Conference talks, but it's kind of dropped off the radar, same as worthiness. And if you'll remember on my high frequency terms list, the word worthy is being used less than it has in times past, which I find kind of counterintuitive. But I invited you guys to give your reason why they may be using worthy and worthiness less. And I don't know if in the last 3 years something's happened with exactness, but let me just show you how it goes. So you have 4 years in a row right here from 2017 to 2020. And then if it wasn't for these 3 years, you would have consecutive years from from 2007 to 2020. Okay, you go back in time before 2007, and it becomes a lot less frequent and more sporadic. Okay, more so than within like the last decade or two, with the exception of maybe the 60s and 70s right here. This period of time probably rivals this most recent period of time, but it's less. And then you go before that, and the first time that we see it show up is in 1962, but you don't see it going back all the way to 1942. Something that I didn't expect. It does a little bit follow the pattern of other words and phrases that have to do with the second coming, where you typically see a spike or a higher frequency in the 70s for some reason. I have my own theories about that, specifically the timing of the both the BYU Jerusalem Center being planned, constructed in the late 70s, early 80s, and then the Independence Visitor Center, which was built to be part of the 24 Temple Complex, that took place more in the mid 70s. And I think that was a highly significant event. I think they both were. But anyway, so for some reason, exactness kind of corresponds with other words in terms that are second coming specific. So let's take a look again at the last decade or two, and you see it's a lot more frequent, just not within the last few years. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to start with the most recent quote and work my way back, and I may not read them all, and I may want to read a little bit from this talk called Beware of Murmuring, which I came across as I was searching for exactness, and I was like, oh, there's some good stuff in here. So let's see how they're using exactness. So this is actually the second one. This is from Michelle D. Craig, first counselor in the Young Women General Presidency, October 2019 General Conference, a talk called Spiritual Capacity. Satan wants to separate us from God's voice by keeping us out of those quiet places. If God speaks in a still, small voice, you and I need to draw closer to him. Just imagine what would happen if we were as intent on staying connected with heaven as we are on staying connected to Wi-Fi. Now, I know that we've all experienced that, whether it's Wi-Fi or just your mobile cell service. It's the worst when suddenly you can't get on the internet and you're disconnected and you feel like you've left civilization. All right, pick a time and place and listen for God's voice every day. And keep this sacred appointment with exactness, for so very much depends on it. Now, this is interesting because what she's saying here is similar to what President Nelson said. President Nelson was talking about making appointments to go to the temple, but she adds, and I think this is appropriate, just like going to the temple, it's also important to have your own like personal time where, you have a moment of like solitude where you can just be in tune with the Lord. So that's what she's referring to here. This probably, in a way, goes along with this idea that how it keeps getting repeated that we need to learn to receive personal revelation, right? That moving forward, personal revelation is going to become more important because there's so much deception in the world. There's so many worldly values that are being preached everywhere, and people are getting confused. Satan is on a rampage right now, and a lot of people are falling victim to it for various reasons. Sometimes it may not necessarily be your fault. You may have just not grown up really being close to the Lord because you've had a poor example from your parents or your family or whoever. And so over time, hopefully you eventually learn for yourself, and then you kind of parent yourself and draw closer to the Lord. Uh, Sometimes it's not so much whether you had good parenting or not. I think a lot of times it has to do with priorities in how your life strategy in life. If you're more concerned about your social survival, your physical survival, how you're performing in this world, whether you're popular, whether you fit in with a certain group, either a popular group or just a group that's not so great, just grungy people, whatever, but you want to fit in. And, being part of that group requires that you go back on your covenants, and it's not friendly toward the gospel. Sometimes people choose the group. They want to feel that social safety net, you know? So there's many, many, many different reasons, but they're saying here we need to really make time for the Lord and allow Him to speak to us. And like I've talked about on the channel, I think it's really important to write down your personal impressions and also your dreams. My dreams, I'm telling you, ever since I've been like really paying attention, I feel like they're so meaningful. And I'm starting to wonder, well, I've been starting to wonder since I've recently started writing down my dreams, if like this entire time, my whole life, if all my dreams have had meaning. And some people scoff, they're like, no, just sometimes dreams are dreams. I don't think so. I think that sometimes people say that because dreams are sometimes silly in nature. Like if they were played out in real life, it'd be embarrassing. But when we understand that it's a perfect way to, like I've said before, encode information in these symbols, so your dreams are like, it's all these like different symbols that when you write it down and then you think about what each element of the dream means, it's like packed with information. So it may play out silly, when you play it in story mode, but if you don't see it necessarily as a story, but underlying information that's waiting for you to extract it, then it's not so silly. And you realize, oh, this is a really good way. Because like, if the Lord is trying to teach you something complicated or it's a good sized message, He's not going to like type words in your brain and then expect you to remember it. It's easier when it's done in a way that we can easily remember. That's like another big part of it. That's the beauty of parables and why I think the Lord works in parables, because you can easily remember stories. And then having that story in your mind, you can then unpack the components of it and go through the layers. So I think it's super important. I would encourage you to write down your spiritual impressions and your dreams if you're not doing so already. Okay, this one is from Rebecca L. Craven. Careful versus casual. April 2019 General Conference. She's the second counselor in the Young Women General Presidency, or she was at that time. I don't know if she still is. If we are not careful in living our covenants with exactness, okay, so now we're talking about obedience and covenants. If we are not careful in living our covenants with exactness, our casual efforts may eventually lead us into forbidden paths, or to join with those who have already entered the great and spacious building. So that's like another way of saying, like, if you're not on guard, if you let like little things creep in that you don't think matter, it really does matter, because over time, it just gets more and more, and you start leaning more and more that way. Okay, she continues, if not careful, we may even drown in the depths of a filthy river. There is a careful way and a casual way to do everything, including living the gospel. As we consider our commitment to the Savior, are we careful or casual? And you guys, I'm just going to say it. I know that there's people that watch my channel that they watch it for the entertainment value because it's exciting. But sometimes a person will kind of show their hand and just flat out tell me, like, I need to be doing better. And I think it's great. I think it's great you learning about the second coming and watching for the signs. We're commanded to watch for the signs. But what good is it going to do you if you don't make it? Either for the second coming or after this life, if you don't obtain exaltation. And there is no progression between glories. We've already done a video about that. There's some people that entertain that idea. There's no progression. You do not. Once this life is done and you've performed your labors here, that is it. And when I say this world, I include, of course, the spirit world. After this mortal life in the spirit world, that is it after that point. So do the work, read your scriptures, go to church, and work on whatever you need to work on, especially if you're not worthy for a temple recommend. That's like when you're in like the red zone. Make sure that you're worthy to have a temple recommend. Watch my channel, but like don't let it take place of more important things like studying the scriptures, reading general conference talks. Okay, because of our mortal nature, we sometimes rationalize our behavior, at times referring to our actions as being in the gray or mixing good with something that's not so good. Sometimes we say, however, except, or but when it applies to following the counsel of our prophet leaders or living the gospel carefully. We are in fact saying that counsel does not apply to me. We can rationalize all we want, but the fact is there's not a right way to do the wrong thing. Very good. Very, very good. Okay, let's move on. Let me take the highlight off this so I know that I've read it during a video. The next one is from Elder D. Todd Christofferson, Firm and Steadfast in the Faith of Christ, October 2018, General Conference. He says, this is the covenant we make by our baptism and in temple ordinances, but some have not yet fully received the gospel of Jesus Christ into their lives. I'm going to highlight fully. I should have done that before. Although, as Paul says, they were buried with Christ by baptism, they are still missing the part that, like as Christ was raised up from the dead, even so we should walk in a newness, right? New, like we've changed, a newness of life. The gospel does not yet define them. They are not, so if the gospel is not defining them, what is, right? What's defining them? Whatever the other priorities are. Entertainment, distractions, fitting in with the crowd, materialism, whatever. Addiction. They are not yet centered in Christ. They are selective about the doctrines and commandments they will follow, and where and when they will serve in the church. By contrast, it is in keeping their covenants with exactness. There's the word, exactness. That those who are the elect according to the covenant avoid deception and remain firm in the faith of Christ. Yep. Again, no one take this to mean that you have to be perfect in this life. We've gone over at least one quote from Bruce R. McConkie talking about you're not going to obtain perfection here, but we still need to make a really good effort, struggle, endure to the end, right? And I think the more exact you are, the less you tolerate uh, from the world creeping into your life. Whether it's I know I'm not the best at it, but whether it's TV shows, music, um, how you celebrate Halloween. We have Halloween coming up, and you can tell some people really revel in Halloween to the point where it's like they really enjoy the kind of degraded, twisted nature of Halloween. And I feel like I've seen a lot of people view it as an excuse, to take off the costume, so to speak, their regular everyday costume, the facade that they have for the rest of the world, and kind of let their actual true selves out and revel in the excuse of, oh, it's Halloween, so gore and skeletons and loud laughter, crude humor, you know. And I've seen it with people in the church. I've seen it with people in the church. Anyway, I feel like when you're exact at the best that you can be, and you try and have high standards, then you don't allow things that other people with low standards let in. And therefore you stay safe and you stay closer. You're living a higher, holier way. And it's not to say that you can't celebrate Halloween. Every ward that I've ever been in, it's normal. It's typical for wards, at least in the United States. Well, we even did this in Spain when I was on my mission. They all have Halloween parties. It's fine. But some people, there is a point where it gets a little bit too far. All right, anyway, let's move on. This next one, it's the one that we already read from President Nelson, so I'll unhighlight that. Okay, the next one is from Elder Adelson de Paula Padilla. Essential Truths, Our Need to Act, October 2017 General Conference. God's prophet today is President Thomas S. Monson, and we will be blessed to follow his counsel with exactness. Okay. The next one, Elder Richard J. Maines of the Presidency of the 70, The Joy of Living a Christ-Centered Life, October 2015 General Conference. Living a Christ-centered life means we learn about Jesus Christ and his gospel. Let me stop here. This is like one of those what you could interpret as like a fluffy thing to say. Something like a primary type thing, it means that we learn about Jesus Christ. And I think that there's people that don't really, they're just like, oh yeah, okay, go to church. And, they don't really learn, like they don't like dig into the gospel. And I'm not talking about the second coming. I'm talking about looking up footnotes as you're reading the scriptures, searching, again, like I do here for the second coming, look up General Conference talks about charity, for example, or, being honest in your dealings with your fellow men, like really learning and studying Christ and how he lived and what that would look like now, and how you can become like that, for example. Like really learning, like really having Christ at the center of your life. So with that in mind, living a Christ-centered life means we learn about Jesus Christ and his gospel, and then we follow his example and keep his commandments with exactness. With exactness. Recently, we were talking about I don't know, this was probably a couple weeks ago. We were talking about garments and properly wearing the garment, not looking for excuses to take it off. That's like an example of living with exactness. It's a pretty simple thing, but you know, or being casual on the Sabbath, for example. We know that we're supposed to not do certain things on the Sabbath and it should be treated as a holy day, but are we doing it with exactness? And I'm not talking about pharisaical exactness, like how many steps you take, or you can't take a pen from one room from one room to the other. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but okay, Jewish line around New York City. So in New York City, the Jews there have this this circle that goes around Manhattan, I believe. A fishing line encircles Manhattan, protecting sanctity of Sabbath. So this is basically like one of those things where there's like a definite rule, and can't remember. Let's just read a little bit of this. A clear fishing wire is tied around the island of Manhattan. It's attached to posts from the perimeter of the city from 1st Street to 126th. This string is part of an eruv, a Jewish symbolic enclosure. Most people walking on the streets of Manhattan do not notice it at all, but many observant Jews in Manhattan rely on this string to leave the house on the Sabbath. The concept of the eruv was first established almost 2,000 years ago to allow Jews to more realistically follow the laws of Sabbath rest, particularly one, no carrying on the Sabbath. According to the laws of Sabbath rest, nothing can be carried from the domestic zone into the public zone on Saturday. That means no carrying house keys or a wallet. It also means no pushing a baby stroller. For parents of young children, no carrying would mean not leaving the house on Saturday. The eruv symbolically extends the domestic zone into the public zone, permitting activities within it that would normally be forbidden to observant Jews on the Sabbath. And here you have, I guess, the map that shows the eruv on Manhattan. I don't know if they do this in other places, like if there's one in Jerusalem or something like that. So, we don't do this. Sorry, I'm not trying to laugh at it. We don't do this kind of thing in our church. But I think that when we live with exactness, we look at the Sabbath day, for example, and it's like, okay, this isn't a day really to go swimming, and have like recreational activities like that. It's not a day to watch, watch worldly movies, and and there's no exact rules, Like, for example, I'd probably say, I think it'd probably be okay to watch some documentaries on Sunday, like learning about the world, But if it's like a documentary that leaves you with a bad feeling, or it gets a little bit too worldly, then probably not. So there's not going to be like things to tell you exactly, other than the Spirit itself. And I guess you have to ask yourself at that point, am I listening to the Spirit? Am I listening to the Spirit on how I should be acting on Sunday, or am I looking for excuses to go do yard work, or I don't know, any number of things? So anyway, okay, so that one's kind of long. Let's skip that. Okay, this one is from Elaine S. Dalton. Young Women General President, April 2012 General Conference. Now is the time to arise and shine. A standard is a rule of measure by which one determines exactness or perfection. We are to be a standard of holiness for all the world to see. So that's maybe something to think about. The way that you conduct yourself, whether it's on the Sabbath or just when you're at work, Are you being a standard? Are you being something by which other people are measuring themselves? And I'm not saying like you're trying to like be prideful and one up the other person, or you're doing it in arrogance, but by truly, because of your devotion to the gospel and to Christ, are you living it, and are you letting your light shine? Or are you giving in to what your coworkers want or are pressuring you to do, or your group of friends or your family that don't share your same values? We are to be a standard of holiness for all the world to see. The new revised For the Strength of Youth booklet contains not only standards to live with exactness, but promised blessings if you do so. Okay. Take the highlight off of that. I might come back to this some other time, these other ones. But you get the idea. Yeah, that's too long. You get the idea. So, but the ones that really I think are really interesting are these ones about having these sacred appointments and then following through with exactness. Is that something that you do? I can't be sure that I'm doing that. Maybe I need to do that. Well, I do need to. Of course I need to do that. If I don't know, then yes, I need to do that. Picking out a time, having a special place, and then ideally, if you can, go to the temple. I can't wait for the Wichita temple to be built, because then it's just going to be like an hour away. But in the meantime, Oklahoma City, 2.5 hours away. But we need to do it. Now, on the flip side, let's see, exactness. Okay, I have that part highlighted. I guess I would like to read a little bit from this. So I came across this talk. I was seeing like the summary when I looked it up, when I was looking up exactness in the scripture citation index. And there's this talk called Beware of Murmuring by Elder H. Ross Workman of the 70. So I'm going to read just a few parts here. The Lord promised the children of Israel that he would send an angel to drive out the Canaanites, that Israel might inherit a land of milk and honey. When Israel reached the borders of Canaan, Moses sent spies into the countryside, and when they returned, they reported that the armies of Canaan were strong and ventured the opinion that Canaan was stronger than Israel. Then began the murmuring. Now, what is murmuring? This would be probably a good time to let me pull up the dictionaries. My 3 dictionaries that I use. Here we go. Merriam. Wait, is it murmur like that? Yeah. Murmur. Let's look it up in Oxford. Here we go. Murmur. And then let's look it up in Webster's Dictionary, 1828. So Webster Merriam says, a half-suppressed or muttered complaint. A half-suppressed or muttered complaint. So someone that's, I guess, kind of like basically showing you their cards a little bit. Still trying to kind of like, like just doing half and half. A low, indistinct, but often continuous sound. A softer, gentle utterance. Okay, let's go to Oxford's. To say something in a soft, quiet voice that is difficult to hear or understand. Number 3. To complain about somebody, something, but not openly. So I guess kind of like passive aggressiveness, under your breath, maybe with like a close group of people or a small community of people that think the same way that you do. And let's see what it says in Webster's 1828. Okay, murmur. Skip down here. A complaint, half suppressed, or uttered in a low, muttering voice. Some discontents there are, some idle murmurers. And then number 2, right here, to grumble, to complain, to utter complaints in a low, half-articulated voice, to utter sullen discontent with, at, before the thing which is the cause of discontent, as murmur, not at sickness or with, okay, I can't read the rest of that, but you get the idea. Okay, so then began the murmuring when they heard about the Canaanites. They questioned the commandment given through Moses, their living prophet. They spread their questioning to others. Right? You look around for support. You look for other people that feel the same way that you do. You don't like something that the prophet said, something the prophet did, something the church is doing. On any number of issues, whether it's the way the church spends its money or the church trying to grow ties with Islam and other world religions, or whatever, just all these like different things. You go around, hey, I don't think that the prophet's inspired. I don't think that the church should do that. Oh, I think that's just his opinion. Da 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 da. So they spread their questioning to others. How could Israel defeat the giants of Canaan when the children of Israel saw themselves, by comparison, as grasshoppers? The questioning turned to rationalization and excuses. They claimed to fear for their wives and children. Quote, "It would have been better for us in Egypt," they declared. The murmuring became disobedience when Israel sought to appoint a captain who would lead them back to Egypt. So at that point, just full on rebellion. And this is what happens a lot of times when it comes to these splinter groups. And there's always these splinter groups off the church. Let's see. List of Latter-day Saint denominations. We've looked at this before. They have a graph right here. You have all sorts of different splinter groups. The Church of Christ, for example, the Church of Christ Temple Lot. They're the ones that own the Temple Lot. Here's the Community of Christ line right here. And even from them, you have these different breakoffs, like the Church of the Christian Brotherhood, Church of Jesus Christ Tonyite, Church of Jesus Christ Restored. Here's this one up here. Breakoffs from the Church of Christ Temple Lot. They're a tiny church, by the way. But Church of Christ Restored, Church of Christ Hancock. Okay, so whatever. All these different groups. And there's even this table right here that shows you recent ones, as recent as 2004, but I'm sure that they're, well, let me see. No, 2007 down here. 2000, 2004. It's really pretty unbelievable, all these different groups. But I'm pretty sure that that's how it starts. It probably starts with opportunists that think that they can do better, or they realize, oh, here's a bunch of people, I can get these people under my influence, and I can break off and start my own thing, and in this way, I'll be prophet, I'll get a lot of attention, I'll get power, control, possibly money. But murmuring is probably one of the main tools of apostasy. I think that murmuring and apostasy go pretty well hand in hand. You have the apostate, and then murmuring is the tool. It's the passive-aggressive rifle. Okay, so they simply refused to follow the living prophet. For their murmuring, the Lord relieved the children of Israel of the promised land, that he would destroy the Canaanites and give them their promised land. Instead, he sent Israel into the wilderness to wander for 40 years. Okay, later on it says, we have sustained by uplifted hand our living prophets. We rejoice in the privilege of hearing the revealed word of God in our day from our living prophets. What do we do when we hear them? Do we follow the instructions of our living prophets with exactness? And here's that word. Or do we murmur? So that's the big question, isn't it? Do we follow with exactness, or do we murmur when something new comes up? Which inevitably it will, because we have a living prophet. And the restoration is ongoing. And there's things that haven't even been revealed yet. And the church changes according to circumstances. Not the doctrine, not the core principles, but the way that the church operates, the day-to-day and the organization of it. The organization that's not doctrinal. Is it easier in our own age to follow a living prophet than it was in the days of Moses or Nephi? Would those who murmured against Moses and Nephi not also murmur today? The same questions can be asked in reverse. So, yeah, if you were living back then, if you have a tendency to murmur, do you think that you wouldn't back then because, oh, it's Moses? But to them, Moses was just a guy, one of them. They may have had an inkling that he really was a prophet of God, but sometimes that's taken away when you're in reality, when you're actually in that situation and you see that person. It's not like this monolithic image in your head of Moses with the 10 Commandments, and it's like, oh yeah, everybody knows Moses. At that time, nobody knew Moses. The children of Israel knew Moses, but it's not like the whole world now knows Moses, like in our day, 2023. So, yeah. Okay, those who murmur today would also have murmured, as did Laman and Lemuel, or the children of Israel, against the prophet of their day, with the same disastrous consequences. And that's all I'm going to read from that, but I think I'll end this with a quote from Sister Nelson. Let's see. Let's go to timeline. No, sorry. Second Coming. Okay, quotes, Second Coming. Exclamation. Okay. So, after talking about how murmuring leads to disaster and undesirable outcomes for you, let's read what Sister Nelson said. This is one of the more recent quotes that I have on this spreadsheet. She said, I know more than ever that for you and for me to be spiritually and even temporally safe, now is the time to stop putting question marks after what is said by the Lord's prophets, seers, and revelators. If we're going to be safe and stay safe, it is now time to use exclamation points after everything they say. This will help us through our Abrahamic tests and Abinadi moments. Remember, Abinadi was somebody that, as far as he knew, until after he passed away, as far as he knew, he hadn't reached anybody. He didn't have any success as he, or at least not that he knew, while he was preaching to them, to King Noah and his priests and that people. Thankfully he did. His teaching affected Alma. But being Abinadi in that moment would have been very lonely. You're basically the only one, really, that's keeping the commandments, living righteously, where everybody else has gone astray. So instead of going along with the crowd, it's really important that we listen to the prophet and keep ourselves separate when it comes to keeping the commandments and being aware of the adversary's trickery, because he is tricky. He can appear as an angel of light. He knows how to appeal to people that don't really study the scriptures and they don't study the prophets. People that just casually go to church. All right. Well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. Like this video if you liked it. Leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.